On November 20th, 2018, Clark County Fire Department personnel responded to a blaze at a remote location in the Mojave Desert. Upon arrival, they noted that the burning building was an abandoned train depot. Once the fire was contained, they noted several irregularities in the ashes. Although the fire had destroyed the building far beyond any hope of repair, hundreds of personal items scattered across the floor were undamaged. These items included purses, glasses, personal identification cards. The items spanned multiple decades in terms of manufacturing date. Some of the items were tools and implements dating back centuries. No items could be linked to the others. Approximately 350 human bones were discovered under the floor, arranged in what law enforcement later described as a ritualistic array. Chief among these irregularities was a large skeleton that exhibited what the coroner described as unnatural proportions. One redacted report suggests that the skeleton possessed structures similar to wings. The most surprising discovery, however, was a middle-aged man weeping among the ruins. He introduced himself as David and apologized for burning the depot down. "It didn't have to be done," he allegedly stated, "but I still had to do it." He was detained and arrested for suspicion of arson and homicide. The homicide charges were later dropped when testing indicated that the human bones were a minimum of 300 years old. The arson charges were successful. Based on the details of his testimony and his clearly unstable mental state, however, the suspect was sentenced to a secure mental health facility where he spent 4 years before undercover personnel discovered him, at which point he was transferred to AHHNASCU. Shortly after incarceration, the inmate submitted to various assessments and field tests. The findings were unusual, even by agency standards. In simplest terms, David seemingly possesses the ability to locate the souls of deceased individuals, at which point he is compelled to hear their final statements, which David understandably refers to as confessions, while escorting them to what he calls the other side. These duties were, and remain, psychologically distressing. Immediately prior to burning the depot down, David states that he failed to transport a passenger. The details of this failure remain unknown. David did not discuss them at any point during the interview recorded below. At this time, the agency plans to implement ongoing treatment with the goal of identifying and hopefully rectifying the details of this failure. Administration hopes to evaluate and, if appropriate, commission David as a T-class agent upon completion of his treatment. Prior to his arrest, David's mode of conveyance for these trips was his truck. David presents as a Caucasian male between the ages of 60 to 65. He is approximately 5 feet 8 inches tall, with dark hair and brown eyes. David's diagnoses include depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and severe insomnia. It should be noted that the site of David's depot bore signs of ritualistic use dating back approximately 500 years. The site is currently under quarantine. It should also be noted that inmate 17 has expressed repeated interest in David. Finally, the interviewers would like to note that David has expressed a desire to change his title to something less ominous, such as the ferryman. "One night I woke up and really needed to talk to my dad. Of course I couldn't, because he died about a month before. I paid for the funeral. It was so small and so cheap it was basically an insult to his memory, and it still ate most of my savings. I didn't regret it. I was just ashamed I couldn't afford to give him something better. Still am. Arranging the burial kept my mind busy. When you're busy enough, nothing really has the opportunity to sink in. But the night I woke up needing to talk to my dad was when it sank in that he was really gone. I got out of bed and went for a drive. Drives were something my dad and I used to do. Probably the only actual bonding time we ever had. It was hard for us to talk to each other, or to anyone really. We were both human dams. But something about those drives broke the dams broke down. We had to actually be driving, though. For some reason, we said a word till after the wheels were moving. Night drives were the best somehow. We never even looked at each other but talked all the way to the other end of the highway and back. He'd always play music from when he was a kid. Sometimes he'd stop at the gas station for sodas and candy. Once in a while, he'd pull into the all-night diner and buy me breakfast for late dinner. Mostly we didn't stop at all. We just drove. But it didn't matter where we did or didn't stop. All that mattered was I got to go for a drive with my dad. But this hitchhiker wasn't my dad. It was a woman. I thought about my grandma. I even thought about Amber's sister. I pulled over. She got inside. I didn't know her, but she seemed to know me. "Mom," she said, "I need you to hear everything I never told you." I frowned but started to drive. "I took care of Roxy, just like you told me to. I really did, but I also really didn't do it right." I felt a sick swoop in my stomach, but didn't say anything. That's one of the rules of night driving. You don't interrupt. I wasn't cruel to her, wasn't mean, didn't neglect her. I would never. Not ever. I took care of her, but I didn't love her. I didn't love her because I was jealous of her. How fucking ridiculous is that? Jealous of a goddamn dog. She sniffed and wiped her eyes. "I was jealous because of how much you loved her. And Mom, I get it. Dogs are dogs, and Roxy was really great even for a dog. But she was still just a dog, and you bought her more clothes than you ever bought me. You put more effort into her treats and prescription food than you ever did for me. You used to feed me stuff that made me sick. I know it was because you couldn't afford anything else, but you still spent more on her. You took her to the vet more than you ever took me to the doctor. And it's not like you knew, but not going to the doctor is how I ended up here at 44 years old. But none of that even matters. What matters is you gave the dog all the love you didn't want to give me. And I get why. I do. Roxy is Roxy, and I'm me." Her face crumpled and she wiped her eyes again. I tried to overcome those feelings because they were so ugly and so stupid. Who gets jealous of a goddamn dog? Especially such a good one? People like me, I guess. I tried to overcome it. I tried to kill the jealousy, but I couldn't. And you know what? That dog loved me anyway. As much as she loved you, as much as I loved you. Hell, sometimes I think she loved me more. Why do children and dogs have to love as deeply as they do? I always wondered that. It's not fair. It's not fucking fair. She released a shaky breath. "You know, Roxy wasn't allowed to sleep on my bed. That was a big no-no, and she knew it. But sometimes I'd wake up crying, or I'd have a panic attack, and she'd jump up and nuzzle me until I calmed down. Then I'd put her back on the floor." She uttered a sob. "Why did I do that? Why? All she wanted was for me to love her back, and she was so easy to love too. I still couldn't do it. She died on a Tuesday morning before work. It was winter. She didn't want to get up. I thought she just didn't want to go outside because of the snow, so I forced her. But she wasn't being a brat. She was in heart failure and the stress of walking in the snow. Oh my God, Mom!" She crawled into my lap and died there. If I hadn't made her go outside, she wouldn't have died like that. Not in the lap of someone who never let her on the bed, unless they got something out of it. She laughed, then sobbed again. If someone gave me the choice, I would burn in hell for an eternity of eternities, if it meant I could go back to give her the life she deserved from me. Sometimes I wonder if you ever felt the same way about me, Mom. I don't know what would be worse, if you didn't, or if you did. Here's my stop. Let me out here. Thank you for hearing." Just off the highway, the train depot shimmered into bright, blinding being. The lady got out and trudged across the sand. Maybe it was wishful thinking, but when the door swung open, I saw the silhouette of a little dog in the doorway, tail wagging 1,000,000 miles a minute. When I got home, it was almost dawn, and Devin was having a breakdown in the front yard. Amber was trying to calm him down. When I pulled up, she ran over and started raging at me about everything and nothing. I sent her inside to rest and took over. Devin was coming down off something, and I could tell it was a rough landing. It happened a lot, every couple months at least. It used to make me angry, but I didn't have it in me to be angry anymore. Even if that wasn't strictly true, my anger only ever made things worse. Both Devin and Amber had plenty to be angry about without me adding to it. So I shut the anger down and sat on the grass with him. Devin started talking. I tried to listen, but it was hard. My mind was going as fast as that little dog's tail. 1,000,000 miles an hour, only these weren't happy miles. All I could think is how pointless it all was. How this life was all I had, and all my kid would ever have if he was lucky.
Not for the first time, I felt like I'd cursed my kid. In a good month, I could afford to give him half of what he needed and none of what he deserved. What kind of life is that? How shitty is it, to love someone so much that you'd kill or die to make them happy, but to never have the chance to do either? This is all he gets, I thought. This is all any of us get. What's the point? A few nights later, I again woke up needing to talk to my dad. I got in the truck and drove along that rutted, broken highway until it turned so smooth it felt like my wheels were running along the air. A few minutes later, I saw an impossibly small hitchhiker waiting on the side of the road. I pulled over. This tiny little boy climbed in. He looked so sick, and he was so small I had to help him. "Daddy," he said, "I need you to hear everything I never told you." I started driving. I wanted to meet my baby sister. I tried to hold on to see her, just like you asked. I tried to be strong, but I wasn't. I'm sorry I couldn't hold on anymore. I was too tired, Daddy. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I kept making you and Mommy cry. His lip trembled. He looked out the window at the wide pale moon and the silver dark desert. "Are you going to forget me? Since you have a new baby now?" I started crying, too. "Please don't forget me. I won't ever forget you. I won't forget Mommy singing to me and holding my hands when I was in the hospital. I won't forget when you were crying in the garage. I was scared. Because you never cry, but then you hugged me and said I was brave, and you were only crying because you were happy I was so brave. I won't forget that, Daddy. I'm sorry I made you cry all the time. I'm glad you'll have a new baby to make you smile. Just don't forget me when you smile. And please don't cry when you remember me. Please just smile. I think I need to get out here. Thank you for hearing." The depot shimmered just off the highway, brighter and soft. "Can you walk with me, Daddy? I know you can't go in, but I'm scared of the dark." I got out first, then helped him down onto the ground. He squeezed my hand as we walked across the sand. "Is it going to hurt?" "No," I said. "I promise." When we reached the door, he looked up at me, beaming. He didn't look sick anymore. "Thank you. I won't forget you. Don't forget me." The door swung shut behind him, and the lights went out. There was such pressure in my chest, heavy and painful, expanding at the speed of light. It felt like it was going to crush me and make me explode at the same time. I opened the depot door. It was dark inside, and empty except for spiders. I went back to my truck and drove home. The road stayed smooth for hours, for so long I started getting scared. My wheels didn't touch asphalt again until dawn. It felt like a warning. So I decided, no matter what, that I would never touch the depot door again. This arrangement, if that's what you want to call it, continued for a while. Maybe once a week I'd wake up needing to talk to my dad. I'd get up and go for my night drive in the desert, trundling down the jagged highway that was so broken it felt like a monster was reaching up to mess with my axles right up to the second the road turned smoother than air. A couple minutes later, I always found a hitchhiker. They were all sad, even the happy ones. That was hard. Being whoever they needed to talk to was harder. None of those people ever knew they were talking to an old fat truck driver named David. They thought they were talking to their dads or moms or grandparents or spouses or lovers or friends or siblings or enemies or kids. Most of them were relieved to see the depot come shimmering into view. A few were anxious. One was terrified. He was disgusting. From the second I saw his silhouette on the side of the highway, everything in me started screaming. For the first time, I thought about driving on past and leaving him in the dust. I almost did. But then I remembered that morning where my wheels just wouldn't touch the ground again. So I stopped, and he climbed in. He was too human and too inhuman at the same time. And what he told me, I've never even imagined someone could think those things, let alone say them. Let alone do them. But he had. And he wasn't sorry. He was glad. He was gleeful. When he saw my disgust, he laughed. What did I tell you, Kate? I'm more than human, and I'm less. This is my stop. Thank you for hearing. The depot was there, but the windows dark. When we pulled up, his eyes went dark too. He looked at me. Instead of glee, I saw terror. I can't go in there, he said. I won't. Before I could stop him, not that I had any idea how I would, he jumped out and bolted out. Across the desert. The full moon cast a wild, awful shadow behind him. As I pulled away, I saw the depot door opening. Something slithered out, something huge and just as awful as him, and took off into the desert, chasing him and his hideous shadow. When I got home, there was an ambulance in my driveway. Paramedics were wheeling Devon out on a stretcher. Amber was sobbing. Before I even got out of the car, I was sobbing too. I tried to hug her, but she threw me off. Devon died that night. I didn't sleep for weeks. There was no one I felt like I needed to talk to for weeks. I'm not sure I felt anything. I think I just wanted to die. The first dead, dreamless sleep I had happened 5 weeks after he died. It lasted 2 hours. Then I woke up needing to talk to him. I was already crying by the time I reached my truck. I drove out onto the highway under the moon, through the silver darkness and the howling coyotes. Their song sounded like what was inside my heart. The broken road knitted itself, turning so smooth it felt like there was no road at all, only air. And then there he was. My boy, standing on the side of the road, waiting for me. I pulled over. Rage, grief, and joy rushed through me, none stronger than the other. Devon got into the truck, scared and wide-eyed. I put the truck in gear and we started driving. I need you to hear everything I never told you, he said. And something inside me broke. A dam, but the wrong dam. Before my son could open his mouth again, I broke apart and started raging at him. Years and years of things that had built up behind the dam. Years and years of things I never told him. But not all of the things I never told him. Only part of them. And only the bad part. He didn't say a word. I raged until we reached the depot, all blazing bright and gold. He opened the door before I even pulled over. Too late, I realized what I'd done. I reached for him, but he shoved me away and ran. I got out and chased after him, but I was slow. And he was fast, and before I made it halfway he vanished inside the depot, and the lights went out. I stood outside, shrieking and begging him to come back out. He didn't. After a long, long time, I went back to my truck. I was scared I'd never find my way back home after that, but my wheels touched the road almost immediately. When I got home, Amber was gone. I didn't get a passenger for months. I barely slept, and woke up 10 times a night when I did. But I never woke up needing to talk to anybody. I never felt any connection. I never felt any hope. It started again about a year later, and went along a regular clip right up until I fucked up. Just like I fucked up everything else. But until then, it was good. I did what I was supposed to. I picked them up. They told me the things they never told anyone else. I listened, and delivered them to their destination. Ferried them to the last stop before their final destination. The depot was almost always bright. I'm not sure why I care anymore, but I'm glad it was bright. I'm so glad that for most of us, the end is soft and golden light.